Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Feldman. This week, our conversation starts with Shawn Busse and Jay Goltz trying to understand why CEOs keep going viral for their misguided attempts to rally the troops. Shawn suspects CEO screeds have always existed, they just haven't been recorded. He also thinks they tend to come more from public company CEOs who are beholden to shareholders. Jay, on the other hand, thinks they're just morons. I really don't understand how someone could be smart enough to run a big company like that, he says, and be so completely ignorant. It's shocking to me. Of course, CEOs of both publicly owned companies and privately owned companies do have to do unpleasant things sometimes. But Shawn and Jay say they've learned from their own experiences handling layoffs and recessions. Do we have to go out of our way to be callous about it, JS? I don't think so. Plus, the very different ways Shawn and Jay manage their hiring processes. Oh, and what would happen if Jay applied for a job at Shawn's company? Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are regulars Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy, and Jay Goltz, CEO of the Goltz Group, whose companies in Chicago include a picture frame business, artist frame service, and a home furnishing store, Jason Home. The episode is titled, When CEOs Behave Badly. Welcome, Shawn and Jay. It's great to have you here. I want to start today. We seem to have had a spate lately of CEOs going viral for the wrong reasons, for talking to their employees in a way that can seem, a little tone deaf. In one, the CEO told her employees to stop whining about not getting a bonus and to get to work. You can visit Pity City, she said, but you can't live there. In another, CEO complimented one of his employees for selling the family dog so he could return to the office. He also challenged the idea that you can be the primary caregiver for a child while also working full time. I don't know, my CEO friends, what are we to make of this?
You know what? You used the word tone deaf. I think that's a little weak. Just morons.
Okay.
No, I've said stuff that I was told. We all at times maybe have said stuff that's tone deaf. This is so huge. There's CEOs and that one of them makes $4.9 million and doesn't think about the fact they make $4.9 million a year and they're talking to people. Like, I don't think that falls under the category of tone deaf.
Not just talking to people, telling people not to complain about not getting a bonus.
Yeah, so I think that's a little soft sell calling that tone deaf. I think that's just,
I wanted to start.
You did. It was a good warm up. You put it right in the middle of the plate for me and I'm hitting it. All right. I just like, wow, seriously? My guess, I'm no expert in this. I've never looked into it. I'm guessing this. If you looked into the background of all these people, they've never been at the bottom anywhere. That's my guess. They went to the right schools and they made a lot, they just can't identify with like regular people. That's my guess. And I could be wrong, but I don't know how you could grow up, or especially in my case, start a business where I had a bunch of people not making much, I wasn't making much more than they were in the beginning and not empathize and understand versus you're making $4.9 million.
Shawn, how did these hit you?
I have a couple thoughts on this. One is that I suspect these types of conversations have been happening for a long time. It's just that now with the prevalence of Zoom and remote meetings and the ability to record things, just like with social media, like we're just seeing people for who they truly are in some cases. And so I just, it's like you used to be able to get away with it, I think. And now it's, I think, harder. And then the other thing, speaking specifically to the Pity City CEO or the pitiful CEO, if you watch her, she starts out pretty calm and collected. And then there's just a moment, you just see her amygdala just hijacks her. Like she just goes into this totally different space. And then when she finishes it, she's just sort of like raises her hand like she did a great thing. And I think she thinks she was motivating and rallying the troops.
Yeah, like mic drop.
Yeah, right. The mic drop moment. And I think, look, if I can be empathetic for a minute, she's running a company that does commercial office furnishings, which is probably one of the worst businesses you could be in the last few years. And so I'm guessing she's getting all this pressure from, the market and from her board to perform. And she's just pushing that down onto her people.
But she still got a bonus, though. Did you notice that? She still got the huge bonus. So I'm trying to be empathetic to her, but I'm having a hard time understanding. Like I said, maybe we've all said things that were, maybe it's just me. I'm sure I've said things that have been tone deaf, but this is so beyond that. I just say to myself, how could you be that ignorant to not at least as a leader to say, listen, I know it's upsetting that you're not getting your bonuses. It's like, how dare you ask? And, it's really remarkable. I don't know. And I'm sure to Shawn's point, this has been going on for years. This isn't a new thing.
And I think two things can be true at once. One is I think leaders are under a lot of stress and have been under a lot of stress across all industries. And also, I think she's a terrible leader. I think they're both true. I think they're both true. I mean, that's just everything about that. The lack of empathy, the size of compensation she gets in relationship to the other people, pushing down on people, motivating through fear and threats. I mean, it is a textbook in terrible leadership. Honestly, I don't think she'll survive this. I think she's out. I might be wrong, but I just don't know how the company goes forward with that kind of behavior. I mean, they've got to do something.
My daughter-in-law is a labor attorney, and she just went off on her own, and she's doing a seminar today, and she's speaking about the intelligent way to do layoffs. In the last 2 weeks, there's been some horrendous examples of it. And I said to her, you know what? You're really doing three things. First, as a lawyer, you have to explain the legal things about it. Okay, fair enough. Then you got to think about brand. Like, your company's going to be known for this. How do you look if you go and lay off a bunch of people and are cold about it and don't do it in the proper way? Then you need to think about if you're going to be calling people back. This is a true statement I'm going to tell you. I've done speeches to hundreds of people. I have never met one when I say, do you know how unemployment works in your state? No one really understands it that I've talked to. I'm sure there's somewhere, but they've guessed at it. And I go, no, that's not how it works. The reality is in Illinois, it's going to cost you, if somebody's making more than like 50 grand, it's probably going to cost like $27,000 of unemployment. You don't get a bill from Illinois. It throws into your rate and it comes out of your thing for the next 3 years. But most entrepreneurs don't know what their unemployment rate is. So it's expensive to laying a lot of people off. So the point is, if you're thinking you might have to bring them back in 4 or 5 months, you know what? You just paid $27,000 out and now you're going to bring them back. So you should consider that. Maybe there's furloughs. Maybe there's other things you do. And then lastly, it gets to another level of, do you want to be a decent human being? I mean, this is disturbing to people. Forget about the brand, forget about the money. How about try to be a decent human being and recognize people are traumatized by that sometimes and try to be nice? How about that?
There are some interesting issues in that, Jay, and things have changed because of the pandemic and Zoom. Wasn't it McDonald's recently that told people not to come into the office so they could be laid off on Zoom? They wanted everybody to be at home. And that was an interesting question. Some people took the side that is the humane way to do it. Let people be at home and not in the office.
That's funny you say that. My nephew just took a job there, a pretty decent job there. And he told me he wasn't sure if he was getting laid off or not. And I understand that running a corporation with tens of thousands of people is different than running it with, 50 or 100. But there probably is an argument as to what's the most humane way to do it. What are you supposed to have a meeting with 100, with 10,000 people? I'm not at all saying that, oh, no, it's got to be one-on-one in person. Maybe it can't be. I understand that, but there's still ways of doing it that are decent and humane as much as you can be. I mean, some people are just going to be upset. I got it. But do we have to go out of our way to be callous about it? I don't think so.
Jay, I'm curious, in your career, have you had to lay people off for like financial reasons?
Listen, I've lived through 5 recessions, 6 recessions in 45 years. I probably a couple of times, like the bad one, 2008, I cut everybody back to 32 hours. We were doing furloughs. And I didn't lay anyone off. If there was someone who was marginal or who was just barely holding on, or we just hired, yeah, sure, I would lay them off because but I've never
so had. You did lay some people off.
Very minimally, though, very minimally. And all these years, maybe 3 people. I don't remember. Wow. But there was never, I've never laid off like 5 people or something. And if somebody was barely holding on to the job, it's like at that point, it's not fair to the ones that have been there for years. That you have to balance out. furloughing ain't great either, and cutting hours isn't great either. So there is a reality to you can only cut people's salaries so much to where they can't put food on the table. So can you cut people from 40 hours to 36? Yeah, probably, but you can't cut them to 25. Now, people do that, but it's just a mess, and I'm not doing that. And I've read this once. Somebody once said, any company that lays off people is an indictment of management. I think that's a ridiculous statement. It happens. It happens. I'm sure sometimes it's done in an irresponsible way for sure, but the pandemic, all the high tech companies are doing so well, they hired a bunch of people. Oops. I mean, who knew it was going to drop off? I mean, layoffs happen. Not here so much, but other places.
How about you, Shawn? Have you had to do it?
Yeah, let's see, how many recessions have I survived? So I started in 2000, that was a recession. We had 9/11, that was kind of a mini recession. 2008, and then the pandemic, which behaved differently than a recession, but kind of had similarities. So 3, 4. 2008 wiped me out, like totally wiped me out. And it didn't hit me until late in 2009. And, I was at a point in my career where I honestly was still trying to figure out how to run a business. I didn't have a good business model. That was really an important learning for me. And, we just got wiped out. All our customers stopped buying kind of all at the same time. And so we had to pretty much lay everybody off, including myself. If there had been any jobs in the market, I probably would have taken it and just become an employee, at least for a little while. But yeah, that was rough. That was really emotionally very hard.
How long did that go on?
That's the funny part about it as I look back at it recently, because it felt like forever. It felt like, wow, we were really suffering for a long time. And the truth was, the momentum was building probably within 8-9 months of that low point. And then within a year, we were like rocking and rolling again.
Wow. I mean, the reality is you got to keep the business in business. And the worst recessions, like I said, I've been through, 6, 7. Did my business ever drop off 20%? Yeah. Oh, wait, it did. But by cutting back the salaries and doing some furloughs and, we squeaked through. It's difficult, but I see some of with the last two you mentioned doing these things. And I really don't understand how someone could be smart enough to run a big company like that and be so completely ignorant. It's shocking to me.
So you have a superpower or secret weapon that these publicly traded companies don't have, which is you are beholden to yourself and your employees. They are beholden to Wall Street and shareholders.
Yeah.
And so once profits fall below a certain level, like they have no choice but to like eviscerate the company. And you can choose to take less compensation. You can choose to reduce wages. You can ask people to sacrifice. It's just like, that's why I'm so passionate about, owner-run businesses, is because they can actually be human. I don't think that Miller Knoll CEO has any choice to some degree, except to like do crappy things. Being a crappy person and forced to do crappy things is a pretty bad combination.
You know what? You bring up a fair point. I don't know what it's like to have to answer to shareholders and stuff. And I call it, selling your soul. I'd like to keep my soul. So that's why I run my own business. I can do what I want. But you're right. I'm not even criticizing them. I just say, I don't understand it. And I think but that's kind of now that I'm thinking about it though, okay, maybe they had to lay people off. No problem. They don't have to be jerks about it, though, and start saying, stop being a pity party. Jeez. I mean, really? That didn't save any money. That didn't help the shareholders, Eddie. I mean, what's that about? That was just like a flagrant foul for no reason.
Shawn, when you had to lay people off, did you feel like you handled it as well as you could, or did you learn from the experience? How do you look back on that?
I was a really kind of baby business owner at the time, and we were very small. So, maybe like there were like 4 or 5 of us total. And, I'd never had to do that kind of thing before. And I had never had any guidance on it. I didn't have any mentors. So it was just really emotional. I felt like a complete failure, just to be completely candid. I was like breaking down in front of my employees. I just felt like such a loser. And, with the benefit of time, I've become a lot more easy on myself, but in the moment, I felt like I was just such a disappointment. It taught me some good lessons,
I had a really interesting meeting in 2008 when it really got bad. I sat there with, I believe, 4 other people. And I said, look, we'll cut the salaries by X amount and then the hourly. But I got to tell you, if we cut the hourly any more than this, they're going to have a hard time putting food on the table. And one of the people around the table who was young at the time said, either, I don't remember which it was either, that's not my problem or I don't care. And it kind of sucked the air out of the room.
Oof.
And that person's still here and is doing a very good job. And I wrote that off to being young or whatever. But like, I got to tell you, I still remember it 15 years later because it was just like, wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually, Lauren, what changed, I'd say like in the early pandemic, I was convinced we were going to go into like an economic ice age. I saw no, path forward that was going to be positive for us or a lot of businesses, because you got to remember, this is before PPP. This is before vaccines.
Yep.
And so I was looking at the landscape and I was like, holy crap, this is going to make 2008 look like a freaking walk in the park. And so what we did, which was so different than 2008, is we went into like action mode right away. And we put together a plan. And we, the plan was all about getting really close to customers, being empathetic with customers, supporting them. We offered many customers like, hey, you don't have to pay us if you don't have the money. Like we literally will keep working for you if you can't pay us. It's okay. We want to help you. And the goodwill that bought was amazing. And the other thing we did is we built a huge spreadsheet that showed, okay, phase 1 is senior leadership, because now we're bigger, right? We're a lot bigger than we were in 2008. So we could like take the hits, right? We had cash reserves. We were making good wages, unlike we were in 2008. So I was like, okay, phase 1, senior leadership takes a pay cut of this much. Phase 2, senior leadership takes another pay cut. Phase 3, middle folks take this pay cut. Phase 4, the lower paid people take a small. So it was really this tiered program, and we shared it with the whole team. Like we were totally transparent about it. This is what we're going to do. And our goal here is to extend the runway in hopes that something good happens. And as it turned out, a lot of good things happened, in terms of the government not treating it like they did in 2008, which was to just basically let everybody to twist in the wind. So, the combination of PPP gave customers confidence to keep going. The goodwill we had built, the better business model we had built, all those things in combination made it so that we actually didn't suffer at all. And then by the end of 2020, we had our best year on record. Best year, records, profits, record revenues.
Wow.
And I really think that those first months made a huge difference because it demonstrated to the team that we as the leaders, we were willing to sacrifice long before we asked them to sacrifice. And I think that's why we had such good retention throughout the pandemic while everybody else was having tons of turnover. Whereas if you contrast it with other companies, as soon as things got rough, what did they do? They laid their people off. And then they realized, oh shit, we need those people, to Jay's point, we need those people back. And then they tried to hire them back and they were like, fuck you, and then they couldn't find people. So I think that there's a big difference in how you treat adversity, whether you do like our Pity City CEO did, or you actually work together. So that was my lesson.
I mean, the fact is, the first thing you should do is not knee jerk.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the second you fire them, it's not like I said, you're just paying an annuity. You're going to pay it in unemployment for the next 3 years. So it's not, you should think about maybe it's worth carrying it for a little bit because it's not free to lay people off.
It's not just unemployment. I mean, a lot of companies pay severance as well.
Right.
And recruiting fees, right? So then when they need people back, they pay recruiters all this money to go get new. It's so expensive. It's crazy.
It's spending a lot of money to do damage to your brand.
Right.
The more I'm thinking about it, you're right, Shawn. We don't know what they have to deal with. Okay, that's clearly part of it. They have to deal with stockholders. But I really think the other strong part of it is they didn't work their way up from the mailroom. They just didn't, most of them. They went to Stanford or something and they got recruited and they got put into these. They really don't empathize. And I think about the way they're talking to these people about get over the pity. This is what they say to themselves. I mean, they're very successful. They probably have a strong work ethic and they've got, persistence. And that's how they want someone to talk to them. And they go, yeah, you're right. They're not talking to themselves. They're talking to someone who's making, $43,000 a year and is trying to make their car payment. They just can't identify with what the real world is about, it seems to me. And that is not what the typical small business owner is at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really different universe. When we wrote the book talking about, how to do marketing in a owner-run business, a lot of it is contrasting corporate America and what's called shareholder primacy, which is where the shareholders are the customer. They're the primary customer, meaning in a public company, it's the stock market. And in a privately held business, you can pay attention to lots of different constituents, including your employees, including your community, including the environment, on and on and on and on. So I think it's just a systemic problem that is really hard to get around. I don't really know what the answer is to it, but I know I don't want to be part of it.
The second company that we referred to is ClearLink, a digital marketing firm. That's the CEO who complimented his employee for selling his dog. I don't think that's a public company. I'm not sure.
Probably got private equity, though, probably.
That would be interesting to see. I mean, you can be a jerk and be a privately held company.
That's kind of my point.
Yeah, I have definitely seen those. But then it's more about what is the characteristic of the leader, because you can really see it in full display versus some of these folks where, I've known companies that were wonderful and then they became owned by private equity and they became not wonderful anymore.
I've seen that, frankly, almost every time. And I'm being generous, so I say almost. I can't think of one that I've dealt with that didn't go the way that went. I mean, it's very painful to watch a good company with a caring owner. The owner sells it, and then all of a sudden the cuts start and we don't do that anymore, and the rules and the policies, and next thing you know, the whole business is just a shadow of what it used to be.
A lot of this starts with hiring. If you do a good job of hiring and hire people who you're happy to have as employees, I think you're going to look at these situations differently and try harder to handle them better. So it gets back to the question of, how you hire people. And I'm curious, do you guys have a routine when you're involved in hiring at your companies? I'm sure you're not the front line, but if you're doing an interview with an important job candidate, do you prepare for that in any way? What do you do before you talk to them? What are you thinking about?
I don't really get involved with it anymore.
Even at the end?
Sometimes, but not a lot. I'd say 90%. I can't think of the last time I was brought in I hired a CFO. I was involved, but no, I'm not brought in at the end.
Okay.
And I feel really good that I've got people that understand our DNA and know what we're looking for. And they're better at it than I, for sure. And I don't say this. It's true. They're better at it than I am. I'm a sucker for the hard luck story of someone that's trying to pull themselves up. And I that's my sucker pitch. And then I hire them and it doesn't work out sometimes. And I've said to numerous people, the entrepreneur is frequently the worst person to be doing the hiring because they're totally into their company. So they talk about it too much and they like people. Liking people too much is hard when you're interviewing. You got to take that off the table for the moment and say guilty until proven innocent. And then lastly, they literally have 21 other things to do, maybe 20 because there's 21 hits. They've got 20 other things to be doing. So they hurry through it, and that's a recipe for disaster. I've talked about this before. When I hired a woman to do my hiring, my business changed. My business has changed to this day. The people she hired for me 18 years ago are still here. She was way, way, way better than I am at it. And I believe the first step is to figure out who should be doing the interviewing.
How much do you get involved, Shawn?
Yeah, I've had a real journey with this. In our period of really fast growth, so say 2011 to 17 especially, I was in it hard. I really believe that at our size, and for context for anybody who's listening, we're about, a 13, 14 person company at that point. And I just believe you can't afford to get it wrong at that size. You think about you have a mishire at 10 people, that's 10% of your workforce is not a good thing. So I was the front line in that case. I would meet people informally, take them out to coffee. I would do a deep dive interview with them. I really took control of that process. And it yielded good results for me.
So you think that's the question. So you think you're good at it?
I'm good at it.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah. My superpower is EQ. Like I can read people real fast.
Wow. Good to know.
And it's good for clients too. Like, cause you can like sense it, this one's going to be tough, kind of thing, or we shouldn't take them. Every superpower has a shadow side. So the shadow side is that when I miss, I've missed in a big way once or twice. And I have learned that I got to be really careful.
How do you explain that? Why do you think you miss in a big way when you miss?
I had an employee once who I think the archetype for them is what's called the political actor, which is that they're really good at building alliances within an organization and using their political power to climb a ladder. But it's a very manipulative way of working. And so they also have probably a very strong EQ, but they're kind of using it for bad purposes. So I have to be really cautious of that person.
So you're hiring batting averages, what, 90%, 80%?
Yeah, if I were to look at that over time, the ones that I hired, yeah, it's probably 80, 90%.
And mine in the beginning was probably 25% because I was just hiring whoever seemed nice and didn't understand the process. And when I do get involved now, I think I'm probably at 75%, but there's people that are better than me at it. So it takes a long time. You really have to make a lot of bad hires before you finally realize that this is trickier than it looks and pay more attention.
I'd advocate for a process too. That's one of the things that I wanted to get it past, just like use Shawn's gut. And we started putting in place a really lengthy process that, in today's market might be too lengthy, but it really produced good results for us. And the key to that, the real win on that one was the last step where we would pay people to do kind of a sample presentation. And so we could actually see how they worked and how they interacted with groups of people. And that was a big deal. Like that change really helped weed out some of the folks who seemed pretty good, but we weren't real sure. And they'd either rise to the next level or they would plummet. That was a big change for us. It really helped. And we still do that today. And when we didn't do that, we hired some bad hires.
And how long does it take you to figure out the one you hired that you shouldn't have? Does this go on for 3 months, a year, 3 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. And something I've been thinking about a lot is that pre-pandemic, I think we knew the truth about the person within 3 months, and then we accepted it within 6. In the pandemic, those numbers doubled. So it was at 6 months, we're I'm not sure, because we're working virtually, right? And it took us almost a year before we're shit, we got to move on with this person.
I think there's two things. One is we get better at hiring. And the second one is you get better at firing, seeing it earlier on.
Yes.
I had one, I couldn't make this up, it's so preposterous. I hired a guy probably 30 years ago to be a outside sales guy. We go to lunch, we come out, and there's a ticket up from the parking meter, didn't put enough money in. And he says, oh, this is what I do. I take the ticket off my car and I put it on the car behind me and I flip tickets. Sometimes they pay it by accident.
Wow.
So I go back to work. If that happened now, I would smile and say, that's okay, we won't do that. I'd come back to work and I'd fire him and say, we're done. Back then, I don't know, I kept him for a few more weeks or something. Anybody that would do something like that, you don't need them in your business. So there's lots of times, I can think of lots of times where I should have known better and done something about it and I let it slide too long. And it's always too long.
I mean, Jay, you've done something that is really, really, really hard, which is you've turned your company into a hiring engine that doesn't rely on you. And I think a lot of owners struggle with that. I think that's really hard.
Yeah, I guess. And just
maybe because you were so bad at it to begin with.
No, part of it. No, because I'm the opposite of many entrepreneurs. They're control freaks. I'm the opposite. I don't want to do the day-to-day stuff. I want to go off and do my thing. Look, and I'm on the podcast now. It's symptomatic of I like to do what I like to do. I don't want to go through reports every day. I'm 80% entrepreneur and 20% manager. Now, I said that to my production guy that's been with me for 25 years. He goes, no, Jay, you're 100% entrepreneur. Okay.
0% manager.
Yeah, but I really don't want to do it. And the key is, keep in mind, the people that I've got during the interviewing, they've been with me for 15, 20 years. This
Yeah.
isn't like I hired someone and 3 years later they're doing all the hiring. So they know it better than I do in some cases. Plus, they've got another advantage. They're not talking to the boss then. They're talking like a coworker. They're going to give a different view to them than they're going to give to me.
Let me ask you a question. So did these people who are good at it now, did they go through a season where they kind of sucked and struggled, or have they always been good at it?
No, I'm just thinking in my head. I don't think there was a big learning curve. They were here for years. They know what we're about. I think they were just good at it. And like I said, I know what my weaknesses are. I love the pulling themselves up by the bootstraps. And I'm a sucker for giving people opportunities. And the fact is, it works a lot, but sometimes it doesn't work. That finding the diamond in the rough, sometimes it's not a diamond and it's just rough.
The big lunk of coal.
Yeah, that's how it works. But I've got 20 stories of people to tell you that I found the diamond in the rough that like are great. There's 20 of them, but then there's the other 10 that, oops.
Shawn, do you have an approach that you could articulate to what you want to hear, what you want to ask with a candidate?
Yeah, I mean, I even have a post on it on LinkedIn. I'm like the 3 favorite questions I like to ask in an interview. So like if somebody's, wants to work here, even just if they've read that, it gives them a leg up. But really what I'm looking for is a history of commitments, and actually I do have some overlap with Jay here. I like to see somebody who's actually demonstrated they've worked on something and they've struggled and they've failed and they've tried something. I mean, one day I discovered that a ton of our employees were children of entrepreneurs. And I realized I was probably filtering in for some of this, which is comfortable with risk, comfortable with uncertainty, knows what it's like to struggle. And we're not talking children of entrepreneurs of businesses where they were just rich and lived that privilege, So I look for stories of work, effort, struggle, triumph, and failure.
How do you get at that? What are those 3 questions?
I mean, one of them, as an example, is the you've won the lottery question. So you've won the lottery. You just got $500 million after tax. What are you going to do with it? And so I like that question because it's, first of all, it's like open sky question. What are you going to do? And it's really interesting because it really shows me very quickly what the values are of the person. So I've heard everything from, the first thing I think I'd do, I would pay off my parents' house. And that's really interesting because it tells me that they're thinking about how do I establish safety and security for people I love before, oh my God, I would go to Hawaii and I would do this and I would travel the world, right? I look to do they put others before themselves? Do they think about something bigger than themselves? So I've had people say, I would start a foundation for decarbonization and blah, 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 blah. And wow, you have a passion other than just this job, which I like. I want you to have something you care about other than just the job or telling me that you want just the job. And then on the flip side, I've heard stories like, oh man, I quit my job and then I would go do this, live in New Zealand, and I would live, in this really big house, very kind of self-centered. And, we all have dreams. We all have things we want to spend money on. But it's really evident very quickly. Do they view the world through the lens of themselves and what they care about all the time? Or do they view the world through a larger lens? And that's been a great kind of mechanism to see what people care about.
That was a West Coast thing done nicely. The whole self thing. Got it. Okay, I'll give you the Chicago version now. I want 4 things. BATH. B, do they buy into the concept? I want to ask them. So tell me, what did you do at your last job? Tell me a difficult situation you had with a customer. How did you deal with it? And you can tell that one's very revealing. Well, listen, sometimes customers can be difficult versus, customers are jerks and blah, blah, blah. So I want honest answers. So that usually gets me something good. A is able. Can they do this job? Did they do it at their last job? And ask, try to find out what they were doing. Here's a big one. Team player, which I have a very specific definition to that. I want someone to be honest. Just tell me what's on your mind. I always say to them, listen, I'm giving you authority. Ask me anything you want about this company you like. Ask me a question that when you go home and you tell your friend, they're going to go, oh my God, did you really ask him that?
How does that indicate whether they're a team player or not, Jay?
Because you can tell if they're comfortable having an honest conversation with you, which a lot of people aren't. Like, and this is the one that brings it up. So tell me why you're looking for a job. Well, it's just time. And then I say, that sounds like a lot of bullshit. What does that mean? It's just time. I mean, did you get fired? I want to hear why you want to leave your last job. Tell me what is it about your job that you want to leave? And I want an honest answer. And I tell them that. Perhaps you've read articles or talked to people that say, don't say anything. I'm telling you, that's not how I operate. I really want to understand why you want to leave your job. Do you have a bad boss? Are they not paying you? And people will usually let their guard down and tell you the truth. And I find that to be a tremendous indicator as to what am I getting myself into? Because whatever they're saying about their last boss could be true about you, or maybe they've got a legitimate reason for leaving. And then the last one is I need people that are a little hungry, that like need to work instead of just want to get out of the house. And I'm not the kind of place where they're working 60 hours a week, but I need them that they want to work their 40 hours. And I've gotten way, way better at it than I used to be because, and then another piece that from what I've learned talking to lots of entrepreneurs, the reference check. Can't emphasize it enough.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
You are asking for it.
100%.
You don't check references. Now, Shawn, I think you'll agree with this. 9 out of 10 times, kind of a waste of time. They tell you good stuff. They work out. That 1 out of 10, oh my God, this person must not have a lawyer. They just told me, that guy, he's a drug dealer. I mean, people say stuff. I think to myself, have you never been told by a lawyer you shouldn't say stuff like, but they do. Because I've learned people do not want to lie for people on a reference check. They just don't want to do it.
It's true. And they speak in coded language too, because if they know the law, they know they need to tread very carefully. But if the person is a great employee, they will go out of their way to tell you that over and over again.
Absolutely. That's the point. So I call Costco. This woman was going to work in my flower department. And I called the guy and I asked about her. And I forgot what he said, but he says, I don't want to elaborate. And I thought, oh, great. Uh-huh. She comes in. I swear this is the truth. She comes in for another interview. And I said, I have to tell you, I called your reference. It was a little troubling. He said he didn't want to elaborate. And she blurts out, yeah, I'm difficult to work with. So, I'm looking for honest. Great. When can you start?
I think, something that's really important in what Jay just said, and I've been thinking about this too, is like you talk about asking experiential questions, tell me about your time you did this. I think that's really critical. And I also think it's really critical that you're evaluating, can they do the work, right? Do they have the skill set? And so my lottery question is also a lot like my sports team question. I ask people, pick a sport you're familiar with. It's a team sport. You can be any position you want. What position would you play? And that tells me a lot about how they think about themselves, how they see teams. So these are like totally different paths, whereas I have other team members focus on, can they do the skills? Can they do the thing? I'm looking for like persona and values. And that's, both of those are really important things.
Okay. So if you were interviewing me and you asked me that, I would say to myself, oh, please stop.
Well, yeah, Jay, you'd make a terrible employee.
Which is why I'm not where I quit.
That's right.
I quit. You can't fire me. I quit.
Yeah, I'd fire you. I wouldn't hire you in the first place. So it doesn't matter.
Right. I'm glad we're on the same page with that.
That's great.
No, I mean, it's, just even your response to that, right? It's like, that's why you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
right?
No, I'm sure that's true. I just don't want to do sports analogies. No, I'm sure you're right. I've taken back my resume.
That's okay. We don't have any openings for you.
I want to ask you both one more question, which is this. Has your thinking about making a counteroffer to an employee who's gotten an offer somewhere else changed at all? I think people traditionally have not liked to pay people to stay in their jobs, but I'm wondering if that has survived the pandemic.
I haven't had one example of that. I'm telling you, I haven't lost. I went through a few people, but it was mostly my choice. No one's come up to me. I haven't had someone quit that's taking more money somewhere. And I don't think in 45 years I've ever done that.
I've never been asked, and I wouldn't do it. Because fundamentally, if somebody's unhappy with their compensation here, I would want them to talk to me about it. I could look at myself and say, have I created an environment where they're comfortable talking about it? But, that whole thing of somebody's taken a job or an offer and then they come to you with that offer, man, that is just a freaking landmine. I mean, they're going to leave you eventually.
Yeah, I think statistics have shown that. But I have to say, and this is just my own little experience, I have not had a lot of people quitting for more money. And I think if you pay people properly, inappropriately, they shouldn't be leaving for money all the time unless if you're in the computer business, I'm sure that you couldn't control that. But like in a normal old time business like mine, I have not lost a lot of people over the years for that.
Yeah, I think if you're in the market, if you're reasonably in market, if somebody's coming to you with a competing offer, you got bigger problems there then. You know, if they come to you with a competing offer and you really are underpaying them in the market, then maybe it's worth examining that issue.
All right. I'd love to keep talking to you guys, but I've got an appointment to sell my dog and I have to run.
Consider renting the dog instead. You have an ongoing annuity
Lauren,
from that.
like
you
that.
can travel to Pity City, but you can't live there, okay?
My thanks to Shawn Busse and Jay Goltz, and of course to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, guys. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at lauren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.